You know what? Fuck it. My name is Ahmad Garland, and welcome to the Balcony Tapes. Hey everyone, it's Ahmad Garland, and welcome to another episode of the Balcony Tapes. Today's episode, we're going to talk about manning the ship. And manning the ship, so simply, is doing all the tasks, all the things that you need to do to make sure that your ship is still afloat. I'm talking about inspections of the mast, the sail. I'm talking about accountability of all the gear that you need. I'm talking about scrubbing the decks. I'm talking about making sure the food's made. I'm talking about all these things that you need to nurture and do every day that we, at least me, hate fucking doing to make sure that the ship, which is me, myself, is still good to go. Now, I find myself trying to tackle big things, like a lot of like life's questions for myself all the time. And what I've realized by doing that over the years is that if I just would have took the time to deal with the small stuff and do the normal preventative maintenance, that the bigger things would have been easier to tackle. So what do I mean by that? One of the biggest things that I did deal with over the years was trying to find out where I wanted to go at each stage of my life. Now, in my personal opinion, life goes in stages. You know, you have different events that you have to get past and certain things you have to do to evolve. And, you know, your life isn't this overarching story. I believe your life is compiled of many stories that create one big tale at the end. But there's no real overarching like arc of like when I was 5 and now I'm 95 and now we've come to the great crescendo. It's like, for me, it's like, no, when you're freaking a toddler, you're trying to get through being a toddler. And now, cool, that story's over. Now you move on to being a young kid, and young kid's over. You go to preteen, that's over, and teen. And just like a lot of segments I feel like life goes in, because you change throughout life. Like, you know, you're continually evolving if you're lucky, and you keep to like become different versions of yourself. And some of them are worse than others. Some are greater than others. Some are regressions. Some are progressions, you know, so it's a mix, but that's what's cool about it. That's what you have the ability to do. And because you have the ability to do that, that's why I personally think, again, life is in segments. And for me is that I always try to tackle this one massive arc of who am I? And that's such a mind fuck of a question, because now looking back, I realized I was exactly who I was at that time. And if I would have manned the ship and done all those little tasks that I didn't want to do, it would have realized and point me that direction, saying, oh, this is who I am right now. So let's get into it. What's a big one? When I was younger, when I was in high school, I would always try to figure out, and you remember in the first episode, I think I might have talked about it. And if not, here it is I moved around a lot. I moved so much. So I got to reinvent myself over and over again. But my last 3 years of high school, I was stabilized, and I knew that I was okay, 10th, 11th, 12th grade. That's what I'm going to do. This is where I'm at. So you have that type of stabilization. You start to wonder, okay, well then who am I right now? Who am I right now? But I wasn't asking right now. I was asking, well, who am I as a whole? And I was freaking killing myself trying to figure this out, like this internal mental warfare with, well, I don't like this, I do like that, and blah, blah, blah. And well, maybe I can do this and do that. Well, this guy does that. And as I told you before, I was picking so many things. But here's the ironic part. And if you're going through this right now, maybe this can help. And if you have been through this, please leave it in the comments and talk about how you did it. But if I would have manned my ship and said, hey, today is where I'm at. This is what I'm feeling. I'm feeling bad. And I said, okay, cool. I did a self-check. I'm feeling bad today. Why am I feeling bad? Well, I feel lost. Well, why am I feeling lost? Well, I feel lost because every time I try to figure out this overarching question of who am I always look at everyone else and what they're doing, and I never turn it on me. Okay. Well, what am I doing? Well, I'm doing this and school and sports and drama and this and that and the third. Cool. Well, how am I with my friends? Well, I treat them differently because based on how they treat me. Is that true? Oh no, I'm actually just freaking will bend over backwards for any of them, even if they won't do the same for me. Okay, why is that? Well, it's my feelings of, you know, being there for people because I had never had anyone there for me when I was growing up, so I want to give that back. All right, cool. You think that's healthy right now? No, probably not. You should probably start changing how you see that. okay, younger self, I'll do that. And now, as you see here, is that I'm doing all these small little self checks with myself, you know, and I'm doing all these little things of like, okay, why am I feeling the way I'm feeling? And where did these feelings come from? And it allows me, right, looking back, it would have allowed me to see that, well, I'm this guy at this point in my time, and this is who I am. And that's okay. And that's where I'm at. And leave it at that. It doesn't have to be this huge, massive crescendo of like, this is who I am, and I'm never changing. Because that's fucking ridiculous. That is impossible. It's impossible to even be like that. But then again, you do see people that you're like, wow, you've been the same way forever. And they're like, oh yeah, it's who the fuck I am. But there's like some coolness in that because that is who they are, and they're pretty stable in their personality. So I guess it really depends who you're talking to, right? But for me, I like to be able to evolve and like to be able to change and go through different evolutions of my personality and my thoughts and wants and needs and things that matter to me. Now, definitely there are some things that are solidified for a long time, and they will be that way forever. You know, certain things are hard lines, not compromisable things about my personality and, you know, things like that. But for this part, I'm just talking about just, you know, keeping sure that I'm good to go on a day-to-day basis. So now, if you want to jump forward to like me currently, I do that. I try to do that every day. I try to self-check and man my ship every day so that I know that I'm okay or not okay or just know where I'm at. And I have found that when I don't do that, I get really imbalanced. I start to feel rage, or I feel this like inextricable sadness, or I get to a situation where I'm like, oh, I just hate everything, or I hate everyone else, or I start saying nasty things in my mind about myself, and I turn the prism over to me, and it's like this really negative self-talk, and it just isn't fair to anyone. It isn't fair to the people outside of my internal environment. It's not fair to myself inside my internal environment, and I kind of create this, no, not kind of, I fucking do. I create this super toxic idea in my mind, and there my whole mood's fucked for the whole day. And now I'm trying to tackle, well, this is everything's going on, and there's so much input, and every little thing's setting me off, when I could have just took like fucking 5 minutes when I first woke up and had been like, hey, you know, this is where I'm at right now, and I'm writing this out for the day. And it's so easy to do that. But because it's so easy, because it's so minute, because it's so basic, I tend, you know, maybe you feel the same way, to overlook it, to overlook checking in with myself, overlook just being like, hey, dude, you good? Ask everybody else if they're good. And don't get me wrong, yeah, there are some times where where we love to just do everything else and everyone else's business than to deal with like anything that has to do with us, because it helps us, you know, distract ourselves for a little bit. But what I'm trying to get at is that only works for so long. Now, don't get me wrong, I've seen people do this for a long time, but it doesn't work, because eventually everything bubbles up, everything goes max volume, and then now you're in a situation where you are overstressed, overworked, overwhelmed, and you're fucking just plainly over it. And now, because you're plainly fucking over it, nothing else around you has any space to get inside to talk to you. So like if you're married, you know, your wife, if you have kids, your children, if you have a partner, that like all of it gets fucking maxed out, flushed out, and pushed away from you because you're just so done. And all you really had to do in the beginning was just man your own ship. So keep that in mind as you go through your days. Keep that in mind as you wake up. Keep that in mind as you're going through your day, or if you want to keep the analogy 100, docking out and going to the ocean, dealing with the waves and the storms and other fishermen. And then when you turn tail and go back home and dock again, you got to be able to take care of yourself throughout the day. And I find myself not doing that most days lately. Because earlier, you know, nowadays I try to do that, and sometimes I fail. But now as I'm talking about this, I'm starting to realize I'm not actually. I don't really check in with myself. I just let myself wake up and I feel weird, and I don't ask myself questions. Like today, perfect example. I woke up and I felt really imbalanced. I felt super out of my norm, out of my element. I felt really out of my mind, and I don't know why. So let's test it out. I felt really, really imbalanced today because I see a direction of where I want to go in my life, and I am afraid to take that next step, because if I take that next step, there are things in my life that would have to change. And it's not so much that I'm comfortable with where I'm at, because obviously I'm not, but the fear of changing something that I've always known is terrifying. And I'm not embarrassed to admit that. I'm not embarrassed to admit that. You have to be able to be able to admit when you're scared, because now that I know where I want to go, I know what I need to do, but I understand that I'm afraid to take the next step. It gives me power. But now I've got to take the next step. There's no other way around it. And it's funny that I'm saying this right now, because the universe has a really weird way of putting you exactly where you need to be when you need to be there. If you truly are ready to get out of an environment, if you're really truly to move on, even if you're terrified, even if there's something stopping you, the universe kind of figures out a way to put you exactly where you need to be. And if you're paying attention, and the universe makes it easy because it throws it in your face, you gotta just take it and you just move with it. Like, think about back to any time where you've been in a really tough spot and you wanted to move to the next spot and you just felt like you couldn't do it, or everything was stopping you, or there was not another option, or you're stopping yourself, or there was some type of obstacle. Do you remember how you got to the next spot? And looking back at it, did it feel like you did that, or did you feel like, everything kind of fell into place? Or there was a certain situation, whether it be a positive or negative, happened that pushed you into the next place you wanted to go, and you just wrote it out, and then you ended up being where you wanted to be in anyways, and you had to give something up, right? You had to sacrifice something. Or flip side, because let's be real about it, not everything's a movie. What if you didn't, and you ignored it, and you just stayed where you're at? How did that make you feel? Did a part of you die? Did a part of you change and redivert energy and redivert design and style? What happened? And these are like the little things that are really, really important that you need to figure out. Because by figuring these things out, you start to realize and understand that, okay, this is where I'm at. This is what's happening currently inside of me. And even if it's painful or uncomfortable, at least I'm stable and I'm solid in it, because that's what matters. That's what's important. It's important to know where you're at and where your ship's going, because you don't want to go into a huge storm or a life event and then that your ship maybe has a hole in it, or the hole's broken, or maybe if the captain's checked out. I've been there. Or maybe the crew, which is all their faculties, are maybe not operating at optimal levels, and now that storm starts to kick your ass really bad. And it just sucks, because it's like, why did I have to get to this point? But now then again, if you're anything like me, I'm stubborn, and sometimes I don't listen. I don't listen to myself sometimes. Sometimes I just allow myself to go into those storms knowing that I'm not at peak levels, and chalk it up to, hey, we'll see what happens. And more times than not, get kicked in the face every time. Yeah, more times than not, every time, kicked in the face. Yeah. But, guys, but that's why it's important, though. It's important to understand, where we're coming from. It's good to understand what is not working. And that's why manning the ship is so freaking important. It is so important. So what can I leave you with? No matter what happens, no matter what you're doing, no matter how your day turns out, no matter how your life is going or where the direction is, and this is something that I use, even though, as we know, not always, but it works. Check in on yourself, do the daily task, the minute, miserable bullshit tasks inside your environment. Just come to find out they're not bullshit. And by doing that, you're building reps and strength, and you're maintaining and manning your ship. If you do that, I think you'll be all right. I think you'll be all right. But let me know in the comments. Was this helpful? Was it not helpful? Or what have you do? What are your skills? What are some things that you use every day to make sure that your ship is manned? All right. Thanks for listening. Talk to you guys next week.
Hey, Mikey. Take us out. My name is Mark Garland, and these are the Balcony Tapes.